College of Nursing and Health Innovation in the School of Social Work, we have a program that we've worked collaboratively with for this afternoon, and the title is An Interdisciplinary Perspective of the Impact of COVID-19 on End-of-Life Care. This is a dialogue between health professionals and community leaders. My name is Becky Baird, and I am the nurse planner for this activity with the University of Texas at Arlington College of Nursing and Health Innovation. We are an accredited provider unit of nursing continuing professional development by the American Nurses the American Nurses Credentialing Commission on Accreditation. Also, the University of Texas at Arlington School of Social Work is authorized to provide CEUs for social workers. I have determined as the nurse planner that no one who has the ability to control the content of this continuing nursing education activity, this CEU activity, planning committee members, presenters, or authors, no one has a conflict of interest. So the College of Nursing and Health Innovation is the provider of this activity, and the UTA School of Social Work participated in the joint planning of today's activity. This activity has received no commercial support. So some details about receiving your contact hours or your CEUs for the social workers. So you will need to have completed the pre-work. You have joined the live virtual presentation. You will attend the entire activity, actively participate in the discussion. That will be the last 30 minutes of today's presentation. And we will have that, we will be monitoring the chat board and sending those questions to our moderator. You will complete and submit a post-activity evaluation, and we will present this link at the end of today's presentation. So do you need the pre-work? If so, you can email my colleague in the School of Social Work, Tracy Orwig, and she will send you the pre-work that you can go back. It's a few readings and videos. So the pre-work will provide 1.0 contact hour or 1 CEU for a total of 3.0 contact hours for the nurses and 3.0 CEUs for the social workers. Today's learning outcome, 85% of the participants, the learners, report that this activity provides information that enhances, validates, or causes a change in practice. So if you have questions about nursing C&E, please email me, becky.baird@uta.edu. And for social work CEU questions, comments, concerns, please email my colleague, Tracy Orwig, tracy.orwig@uta.edu. So the certificates of successful completion, CEU certificates, those will be emailed within 2 weeks of today. So 2 weeks from Friday. Also, we will close the evaluation link on Tuesday, March 30th at 12 noon. So please make sure if you want your contact hours or your CEUs that you complete your evaluation by 12 noon on Tuesday. Okay. Within the evaluation, you'll be asked what your name, credentials, and email is in order for us to send your certificate. So please make sure that you respond to that question so we know who to send it to. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing, and it is my pleasure to pass the presentation over to Dr. Pamela Fox, who is going to be your moderator for today. And so Dr. Fox, you're on. So thank you.
Becky, I believe she's actually having trouble logging in.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll get her. So there was so I'm seeing some things in the chat here. Okay, so we'll wait patiently. So for the participants, while we're waiting, if you'd like to put in the chat board where you're listening from. Okay. So Melinda had to join audio via phone. Okay. Fort Worth, Louisiana. Great. Welcome. Listening at home. Yes. Good, good. Knoxville, Tennessee. My goodness. Down the street. Fort Worth. Oh. So we have some of our UTA faculty are joining us. Okay. Well, we're still waiting. One thing I didn't do was to thank the planning committee. This is part 2 of our series. The first one we did was February 5th, which was interdisciplinary conversation as well with COVID disparities. And so our core planning group has been social work, Dr. Fox, Tracy Orwig, Coral Simpkins is our IT specialist from the School of Social Work, Patty Allard from College of Nursing, Gabriella Whitener, College of Nursing. We have part 3. The last of the series will be April 30th. And that'll be from 2 to 4. And we're talking about moral distress and advance directives, some ethical issues for part 3. So you all will get that promotion out fairly soon. The first part was not recorded. So unfortunately, we don't have that available for viewing.
No, it is available. Part 1 is available on the School of
Oh,
Social Work Facebook page and the College of Nursing Facebook page.
okay. Yes, it's for nursing. It's not set up for any contact hours um, um, as a program that is, and I'm blanking on the word. This is a live program, so we don't have like the asynchronous. But sure, to go back and watch that would be fine. Yes. Yeah, Coral, thank you. She's handling the chat board quite well. Thank you. So if you came in a little bit late, we're waiting for our moderator to get logged in, having some technical issues. So,
Why don't we have our panelists introduce themselves?
all righty. So we could start. Dr. Allard, I see you in one of the squares. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Patty Allard. I am from the College of Nursing. I'm capstone lead faculty for on-campus and off-campus, and RN to BSN Legacy of the Family. And glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Patty. Dr. Fox is on, but let's go. Reverend Boswell, I see you in my corner square. Would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, and you're muted, sir.
I'm Daryl Boswell, and I'm a staff chaplain at Houston Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas. I'm certainly glad to be here today.
Okay, well, thank you. Ms. Bracken, you're up in the opposite corner. Oh, and I can't hear you. And yeah, still can't hear you, I think. Ms. Hughes, would you
I'm
like
here.
to? Yes, yes. Oh, good old Zoom.
I'm Stephanie Hughes. I'm a funeral director at Hughes Family Tribute Center, Dallas's only life celebration funeral home.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Gabriella?
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriella Whitener. I'm a clinical professor at UTA for the med-surg division, and I'm delighted to be here sharing this opportunity for sharing information.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. Reverend Seaton, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Melody Seaton, founding and senior pastor of Grace United Church of Christ in Sauk Village, Illinois, and it is a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Dr. Fox, I am ready to turn it over to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all for being very patient with me. We are still in the Fox home. We're recovering from the severe winter storm from 6 weeks ago, and so our house is in terrible disarray. And we're having technical difficulties a few minutes ago, but we're all better now. So it's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to talk about this very, very important subject. And just wanted to let you know that today's talk is a follow-on to our initial conversation that we had several weeks ago back in February. And excuse me, by matter of introduction, I'm Reverend Dr. Pamela Fox. I'm an assistant professor of practice at the UTA School of Social Work. And I'm also a psychotherapist in private practice in Arlington, Texas, with Synergy Counseling and Coaching Center and Foxfire Outreach Ministries. And just wanted to share with you as we get started for today that today is part 2 of our 3-part series. Part 1 in our conversation was held back on February the 5th. The topic at that time was a multidisciplinary perspective on the disproportionate impact of COVID-19, a case study. Very well attended, very well reviewed. And so we're following on today with, again, part 2. And our part 2 is entitled The Interdisciplinary Perspective on the Impact of COVID-19 and End-of-Life Care. So again, we wish to welcome you this afternoon, and so glad that our listening partners, our students, our faculty, our staff, our community conversation partners are here with us today. And so thank you for your presence at today's activity. As we get started, as perhaps my colleagues have already mentioned, that certificates of completion will be provided up to 2 weeks after the submission of your evaluations. And the link will be provided this afternoon at the end of this program. The evaluation link will close on March the 30th, Tuesday, March the 30th at 12 noon. And for more information that will be provided in the link in terms of points of contact related to professional development. Wanted to also share with you before we get underway that our discussion for today will be around end-of-life issues. And for some of our listeners, for some of our participants, it may stir up some feelings and emotions. So we encourage individuals who are experiencing distress during or after this event to reach out to a mental health resource. Some of the resources that I'll share with you at this time, and it'll also be listed, I believe, in the evaluation and other feedback to you, is for UTA individuals, may call the 24-hour MAVS Talk Crisis Line. That number is 817-272-8255, or the UTA Counseling and Psychological Services Center at 817-272-3671. Also, there is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And also you may call the local number 211 to be connected with local resources and support. We trust that you did get a chance to take a look at the pre-reading materials, and for which, in terms of you're looking at the videos in the pre-read, that will provide you with 1 hour of continuing education credits. And that's 1 hour for registered nurses, 1 hour for social workers. And again, the attendance at today's activity, this is a 2-hour program, provides you with 2 hours for a total of 3, the pre-work and then today's activity as well. So with that in mind, we're going to get started for today. And in that regard, I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint presentation. I believe I can share it. And here we go. All righty. So welcome to our presentation for this afternoon. And then we're going to hear from our speakers in just a few minutes. But as we begin today, the name of this part of the program is called Community Responses, Holistic End-of-Life Community Responses During COVID-19. Our planning committee are from the University of Texas at Arlington, both from the School of Social Work and the College of Nursing and Health Innovation. I am today's moderator for you. My name again is Reverend Dr. Pamela Fox, Assistant Professor in Practice at the School of Social Work. I wanted to let the audience know that in June 2020, 2 of my extended family members died from COVID-19. Our other planning committee members are Professor Tracy Orwig, Assistant Professor in Practice at the School of Social Work, Dr. Sophia Fantas, Assistant Professor of Research at the School of Social Work, Professor Becky Baird, Clinical Assistant Professor in the Undergraduate Nursing Program at the College of Nursing and Health Innovation, Dr. Patricia Allard, a Clinical Assistant Professor, College of Nursing and Health Innovation, and also Dr. Gabriella Whitener, Clinical Assistant Professor in the Nursing Undergraduate Program at the College of Nursing and Health Innovation. Our sponsors for today are the University of Texas at Arlington School of Social Work and the College of Nursing and Health Innovation. And this is our very special professional development and continuing education program. Our learning objectives for today are to describe end-of-life impacts of COVID-19 on individuals, families, and communities, to describe how COVID-19 has impacted end-of-life interdisciplinary professionals, including chaplains, pastoral and spiritual caregivers, faith community leaders, and funeral directors, and to consider future applications of the knowledge gained to better serve and support individuals, families, and communities impacted by COVID-19. Wanted to remind you all, I'm a social worker, has been in social work for a long time, and so we celebrate March as Social Work Month. We celebrate social workers as we are helping and healing professionals. Social workers are essential, and social workers are generations strong. Again, I wanted to remind you that this presentation deals with emotionally sensitive and subject matters, and so please be mindful about your own self-care needs. Here we see the very colorful COVID-19 virus. All of its spikes and everything looks like a Christmas tree ornament, but we know that it is very serious business. The other serious business is that in March and April of this year, in various states, there was the removal of mask mandates. The masks are barriers to getting the virus, so this removal of mask mandates is very serious business in the various states where this applies. The other thing that we're mindful of is that from March 1st of 2020 to March 26th of 2021, there have been more than 500 deaths in the United States due to COVID-19. Families are sad and grieving because of COVID-19. In terms of our community response, it requires a holistic approach. And this holistic end-of-life community response during this crisis, pandemic crisis time includes professional social workers who are psychosocial helpers and healers. It also includes professional nurses, healthcare helpers and healers. Other members of the holistic team include palliative care providers who deal with pain management, hospice and end-of-life doula caregivers as well, and also chaplains, spiritual caregivers in communities and hospitals, and also in the military. Our other conversation partners as well are pastoral care and spiritual care leaders in the communities, and also other faith community leaders as well. But certainly our other conversation partners as a part of the holistic end-of-life responses to COVID-19 include our funeral directors, also called the last responders. They are caregivers and helpers, and they help us to be mindful about celebrating lives. We celebrate lives well lived. We know that our loved ones, our friends, our family, our co-workers, that they are gone too soon, and may they rest in peace and power. new information that has just come out just recently is the 2021 FEMA Recovery and Economic Support for Funeral Assistance. Please be aware that starting in April 2021, the Federal Emergency Management Agency will accept applications to provide for up to $7,000 to cover funeral expenses for people who have died of COVID-19. This funeral assistance money was appropriated under the last two federal COVID-19 relief bills. That is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021 and the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. With this economic support and recovery support from FEMA, the death must have occurred in the United States. The death certificate must indicate death due to COVID-19, and U.S. citizenship is not required. For more information, please see the COVID-19 funeral assistance at www.fema.gov. So for all of our holistic conversation partners, helpers, healers, that we thank you so much for all that you've done and continue to do in the lives of our people. At this time, we're going to segue to hearing from our conversation partners, as they're going to share with us their perspective, their experiences with community response in this holistic end-of-life process. You've heard their introductions already. So our interprofessional conversation partners, as you already know, include Ms. Stephanie Hughes, Reverend Melody Seaton, Reverend Chaplain, I should say, Daryl Boswell, Dr. Patty Allard, Ms. Tina Bracken, and Dr. Gabriella Whitener. So at this time, I'm gonna facilitate some conversations with our conversation partners, and I'm gonna begin with Ms. Stephanie Hughes, if you would share with us.
Obviously, it's been a very rough year for everybody. My heart breaks for all the medical professionals out there that are having to deal with it. But we're part of the continuum of care. So whether our person comes to us through hospice or through a hospital or from the police because they died at home, we take over from there, trying to take care of that family and make sure that they heal. The whole thing is about healing. And this grief is much, much more difficult than your normal, mom was ready to go home kind of grief. We also have more than just COVID we have to deal with because we've had a lot of stress deaths and from the shutdown. And a lot of suicides, unfortunately. We did more suicides last month than we did all last year. It's kind of an epidemic proportions. So people really need to take care of themselves and watch your loved ones and your friends. Make sure people are okay. If somebody looks down, ask them, you doing okay? I don't look at this as the new normal. I reject that statement. This is a season. We're in a season and we got to get through it together. But we're going to get through it.
I like what you said, Stephanie, about this being a continuum of care. That it's not just the last responders, but it's the first responders, and it's the doctors and the nurses and the palliative care, and everyone is a part of this process. It's that holistic aspect of life, body, soul, and spirit. And because I know you've been in your profession for a long time, and we've just been in the pandemic for a year, I know you've seen some very interesting dynamics in terms of the work that you do as one of the last responders, you and your family. Tell me, because of the magnitude of what we're going through, what you're going through right now, what are you and your colleagues in the profession doing for your self-care and to try to get some work-life balance there?
There hasn't been much work-life balance this year. That's why I look at it as a season and not a new normal. My husband and I took on the brunt of it in a lot of ways because we tried to make sure our employees had days off and things like that. So my husband and I haven't had many days off. we're blessed because we're together at least. And that helps with my self-care that he's here with me. And when I go home, he's with me and he knows what we've been through that day. So that really does help. Personally, prayer makes a huge difference for me. And I just think the practice of gratitude is so important. I'm thankful for every family that walks through my door, and I'm thankful if I can help in healing in any way. It's just, there's just been so many. One thing I struggled with is having so many. I'm used to giving this much care and this much communication, and you know, sometimes it couldn't happen because I had so many I had to get to, and that ate at me for the longest time until I realized, you know, they're still getting more communication than they usually get. It's still okay. It's okay.
Have you had opportunities to talk with some of your colleagues at other funeral homes at all, just to check on them? They check on you to see how you're doing.
Oh yeah.
Have you been so busy you haven't had time to talk?
We're in a community of family-owned funeral homes, and for a while there, we got together quite often to talk about what are you doing, how are you handling this, how are you handling that, how are you disinfecting? Because we have more than just taking care of families. We have guests that are coming in. You're trying to keep them safe. You're trying to keep your employees safe. You know, there's a lot of dynamics to the whole process, and so you're trying to make sure everybody is okay.
I so appreciate that. You, what if anything, lessons learned over the past year that'll help you going forward? Anything you want to share with our audience today?
I think you don't realize how important things are until they're taken away from you. So I think people learned how important it is to gather when somebody dies. To experience that loss together, to be together during that initial grief part. And it's really important. And I think people are realizing that. All of our disinfecting and things, we thought, okay, we're going to still do this during flu season. Maybe we can, you know, keep flu down a little bit here. So we did learn that too. I learned how, I knew how important our life celebrations were. But when somebody's hurting as bad as they are because they watched dad die on Zoom, or, you know, this is the second one in the family we've taken care of, it just multiplies that grief. When they walk in and they see their loved one's life at their funeral home, and it's more of an uplifting experience when it's a life celebration, it makes my heart happy.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. You and your family and your husband and all of your colleagues, keep doing what you're doing. The things that you mentioned about the practice of gratitude and prayer, the importance of that, and the celebration of life, and how important it is to process for the family, for them to process their thoughts and feelings about grief and loss. That is so, so important now and going forward. Now and going forward. Because what I know as a therapist is that people have what's called anniversary reaction. Around the time of Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, death days, the trifecta of holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's.
Yeah.
And so there'll need to be more support that's offered because of the catastrophic nature of this pandemic to all of the survivors.
Yeah.
To the survivors.
We're doing a Mother's Day butterfly release for that reason. We've done them every year. Last year I didn't. This year we're just going to spread out and do it.
Praise God.
But people need to get together.
That's right. That's right. Socially distanced.
Yes.
And with masks.
Spread out.
All right. We're going to move on to Reverend Melody Seaton. Reverend Seaton, if you would share with us your role at your church and how you've engaged with individuals and families regarding COVID-19.
Well, I am the senior pastor, founding pastor, and we do have a small congregation. And we didn't close the first week because of the size of our congregation, and I needed some time to really take it all in. It was a lot. I was at a retreat with other pastors when we found out, and so that was a blessing to be able to be supported by others in the ministry who also were heads of churches and served in other capacities, because what we went there for was an opportunity for rest and relaxation. And it was more important than ever that we have that, because there was a lot to do. Immediately, I went into fix-it mode. I'm a former school administrator. And so I know what to do on the spur of the moment. So once I came out of that, it was, okay, what are we going to do to keep everybody together? Once we closed the doors of the church, we went into a conference call, prayer lines. And we did that every single Sunday morning, in addition to recorded services. And during that time, we allowed people to be honest about how they were feeling. Nothing anybody said was shunned. It was encouraged. People were afraid. And I made note of those things. As a result of that fear, I did 2 Facebook Live presentations entitled Faith and Fear, because a lot of my colleagues were shunning the fear part. And that's, that's up for debate. I think personally, I feel like we have to let people be honest about where they are before we can take them where they should probably go. So,
have you had to conduct funerals for members or family members who have passed from COVID?
Well, no, I haven't. We had parishioners that contracted the virus, but praise God, nobody passed away. However, many of them had family members or friends or coworkers that did. So it was through, and of course we didn't know, because every time you hear about someone's family member or whoever passing away, that the prospect of it happening to you was there. And so again, we dealt with the honesty of how people were feeling, but we also wanted to go back to our faith and the fact that, number one, death is inevitable. Certainly nobody wants to as I think Stephanie said, it's easier to know that mom or dad or whoever has decided it's time, as opposed to something that is so mysterious and so devastating as the coronavirus. So, but we still wanted to talk about what people felt about death and where they, were, and that if we die, we will also live. So we wanted to make sure there was hope in there, and to how to live now, because some people had gotten so afraid they were ready to give up. So we talked about our immune systems.
Yes.
We talked about stress, and how fear is a part of destroying the immune system. So.
At my home church, our pastor talks about the fact, because we've been Zooming for a year. So our church doors closed in March last year. Our pastor says the church is not closed. We've been redeployed.
Amen.
So we've been redeployed to the streets, been out water and food and money and just seeing humans and drive through worship service and that kind of thing. So ministers in the community have had to do different things in order to continue to engage the parishioners, to let them know that God is here and God is still in the blessing business, and that prayer changes things, and that attitude of gratitude. That's what Stephanie mentioned, and I hear that from you as well, Reverend Seaton. That attitude of gratitude and being there for folks, conquering your fears with faith, and how important that is, how that is ministered to your congregation. And that this, as I mentioned to some colleagues of mine, the significance of this pandemic is that in our lifetimes, we've never experienced anything like this ever. The last pandemic was 100 years ago. We don't have any 100-year-old folk on the line. So we've never experienced anything like this ever in our lives. And some of us are still kind of like reeling from the magnitude of all this, which has resulted with some people having what's called Covet Phobia. That's a new word, where they're really scared to go anywhere, scared for their spouse or their loved ones to go anywhere. outside of the house. So they put themselves on perpetual lockdown. And so that's something, and what Stephanie talked about, the risk of death from suicide, risk of self-harm, loneliness, isolation, so forth and so on, stress can be deadly. And so the fact that we're able to process our thoughts and feelings and try to hang on just one day at a time and continue in this recovery process is so vitally important. So just out of curiosity, what are you doing, Reverend Seaton, for your self-care and wellness, your work-life balance?
Well, one of the things that I did was to connect myself with other ministers, but just other people in general. There are so many online offerings. And if it was something that normally I wouldn't have an opportunity to participate in, but I wanted to, I had time to, and I jumped in. I met some really awesome people from all over this country that I wouldn't have normally had an opportunity to do that. So that was one of the things that I did. Because I have been in the education field for 38 years, just recently retired, a mother, a grandmother of 5, I rarely have time to myself. So I didn't need to do anything in particular. Just being in the house by myself was really self-care for me. But I also had to learn how to do things. I had to go back to the days when I could not go to the hairdresser because I couldn't afford it. Or couldn't get my nails done, and so I learned how to do those things again, and it was beautiful. It was a great feeling. I could keep the conditioner on as long as I wanted to. I could massage my scalp, the way I want to do it. And so yeah, I just enjoy doing the simple things of life, and just ask and bless God for that downtime, because I don't get that often.
Good. That's good. That's good. And so I so appreciate your sharing with us today, and continue in the work of the ministry out there in the vineyards in Illinois.
Amen.
Where I come from, I'm a native
Right.
Chicagoan, and so
Right.
Dr. Seaton and I, or Reverend Seaton and I, go way back in terms of
Yeah.
our walk over
Yeah.
the years. We're going to move on to, thank you so much again, Reverend Seaton. We're going to move on to Chaplain Boswell, if you would share with us.
Thank you, Dr. Fox, for this opportunity.
Welcome. Tell us about your role there, where you are at Houston Methodist, and what's going on there in Houston.
I'm a staff chaplain at Houston Methodist Hospital. There are about 30 chaplains in our facility. We have a huge hospital system here. If you've never been to Houston, the Texas Medical Center is the largest in the world. There are 54 hospitals in the whole Texas Medical Center. And so there are lots and lots of things going on there. But at Houston Methodist Hospital, just to kind of give you an idea about the COVID numbers, we started on March the 5th of 2020 with one patient entering our ED, our emergency department. And since that time, we've had over 38,435 patients come through with COVID. Many of those, fortunately, were able to go home and recuperate at home. We did have 15,000 patients that were hospitalized. 13,000 of those were actually discharged and got to go home. But unfortunately, we had 1,476 deaths due to COVID. I think one of the things that truthfully just irritated me is when I would hear people say, this is not a real thing. This is a hoax. This is something the media has conjured up to scare us. And nothing could have been farther from the truth. And so we're dealing with that on a daily basis. Fortunately, in our 8 hospitals in our system, there are only 205 patients currently COVID patients currently in our hospitals.
What do
So
you
one,
think? I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh,
I was going to ask, what do you think, given the fact that the vaccine is is available right now? How do you think that's going to impact patient care going forward?
well, I think just seeing the numbers, the drastic decline in hospitalizations shows that that vaccines are working. And as we move closer and closer to the magical number of herd immunity, that's a term that we hear a lot on television nowadays. I think that you'll see that that number significantly reduced. But it is something that we deal with still on a daily basis, and unfortunately, we still see people dying from this disease that have maybe been in the hospital for months, and their families have had to deal with this. And so, for a chaplain, we have been taking care of the patients as much as we possibly can. But then there's also the aspect of taking care of the family members. And during the height of the COVID, we had so many of our staff members that were just scared to death of what's going to happen. So our care for our staff increased significantly during this time.
Say more about how your ministry changed over the course of the year, given the pandemic.
Well,
What did you have to do differently, if anything?
well, we did a lot of things differently. One of the things that happened with COVID patients, we were not, as chaplains, not allowed in the room. Now, Houston Methodist Hospital they viewed chaplains as essential workers, and so we never were furloughed or had to work from home. We were always here. But of course, the first thing that you had to do is wear the PPE when you were even just going into other members. For those COVID patients that were not intubated and sedated, we could talk to them over the iPad, which was something that was brand new to us, and dealing with people via technology. And there was a learning curve to that. Not only did we minister to the patients that way, but also to the families that way. And so I think we went through 5 or 6 different systems trying to get one that was easy to use and worked properly, and where we could actually get the patients and the family members in the same video conference call at the same time and minister to everybody together. The isolation dealing with the patients was one of the things that we'd never really dealt with before. And without having patients' families in the hospital, that was a real thing that we had to deal with on a daily basis, was the isolation the patients were going through, but also the isolation the family members were feeling because they couldn't be in the hospital at that time. So yeah, that was one of the big things, the technology. And it may sound a little bit crazy, but the other part of this was just dealing with wearing the mask and what was behind the mask. I used to talk to staff members and say, well, how you doing today? And they would always say yes. And I would ask them this question: if I could take that mask off, if you would take that mask off, what would I see? What would I see? And what I learned was that I would see deep sadness or total exhaustion or fear that I'm going to take COVID home and infect one of my family members, and they're going to die from that. And then I'll have to deal with the guilt of that. The other thing we dealt with was nobody really had a place to recharge. The travel restrictions, we couldn't leave the hospital. And then we were grieving the ordinary things like going to church that Pastor Seaton had talked about, going out to eat. social gatherings, and maybe one of the biggest things that I never heard anybody this last year talking about their goals, other than let's just get through this thing, you know. And every week that it extended out, you heard less and less about goals, and so the loss of dreams was something that I think was devastating, and we saw a lot of people even grieving that.
The theme, the thread of grief and loss of all sorts is, from what you're describing, what our other colleagues have already described, is keeps getting woven throughout. It's not just the loss of loved ones, but it's loss of social gatherings, of going to church, of going to the restaurant, loss of dreams and goals. This is so profound,
Yeah.
so profound. What what have you been doing for self-care?
Well, fortunately, I'm part of several associations. I'm certified with two different certification groups: the Association for Professional Chaplains and the Spiritual Care Association. I'm also a Southern Baptist chaplain and the North American Missions Board, and our Texas Medical Center chaplains. There's an organization that we all are a part of. And then Houston Methodist Hospital have done so much as far as offering us ways to take care of ourselves with things like guided meditations, and I went through a mindful exercise, many different mindful exercises, but the one I probably enjoyed the most was when they were talking about cooking. And of course, mindfulness in the kitchen with baking or barbecuing. And one of the things that I've done is I actually have set out to find the perfect chocolate chip cookie recipe. And so every week I seem to, every weekend for the last 6 or 8 weekends, I've baked 3 dozen chocolate chip cookies of different flavors and things like that. And of course, going for self-care, eating those chocolate chip cookies probably hasn't been the best thing either.
No. That leads to corona weight gain.
That's what it does, yeah, for sure. But I also have gotten massages on a weekly basis, which when the massage, like Massage Envy, opened back up, I was able to do that. The hospital has done something for us too, that with the employee assistance program, they've provided for counseling that myself and my wife, who also works for a hospital, we've done that separately, and had some marriage counseling that our employee assistance program has helped with. And then maybe my greatest support has come from my dog, Cammie. She's a 92-pound lap dog. But when I walk home, come in the doors at night, and she's wagging her tail and so excited to see me, and she can sense, I think, that I've had a tough day, and she'll come and just lay down beside me. Those things have gone so far to help me stay safe and to take care of myself.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Cammie is your emotional support animal, you would say?
Absolutely.
That's a wonderful thing. Thank you for sharing so much, Chaplain Boswell. Keep up the great work that you're doing there in Houston, at Houston Methodist.
Thank you.
We're going to move on at this time to Dr. Patty Allard, who would share with us.
Just need to unmute. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You may go ahead. Tell us about your role.
Well, my role, when I introduced myself, I mentioned that I am lead faculty for Capstone. And Capstone is for the soon-to-be graduating senior level nursing students. So it's their very last course before they graduate. And this is it was 132 hours of clinical. So they're at the bedside for 132 hours in their last semester. And that really puts it all together for them. And they then graduate and get into a role as a registered nurse once they pass their NCLEX. But prior to COVID, students were able to accomplish all the clinical hours at the bedside. And suddenly, last March, about March 31st is when it hit the university. People were, well, actually spring break, they were asked never to come back, right? And so they immediately went 100% virtual. And the impact on some courses was not, we've had hybrid courses, and virtual coursework is not uncommon to the College of Nursing. But when you have 100% clinical course that now needs to be virtual, it was, again, a grieving and a loss for the students, because that clinical experience is so valuable to them and after they graduate. But the hospitals were overwhelmed with COVID patients, and undergraduate students weren't allowed to the hospitals, and that was partially to protect the hospital was overloaded and couldn't offer preceptors, but also the students were fearful and anxious and frightened to death. They didn't know, none of them wanted to bring that COVID back to their families, and many of them had losses in their families while they're trying to accomplish this last semester. So it was devastating to them on that level. When we started to slowly be allowed to come back into the hospitals was in the fall of 2020. And at that point, only a few places would have students. So when they came in, they were very afraid to be exposed themselves or to expose their families. Many of them did get COVID, the students, but rarely was it from exposure within the hospital. It was really from social gatherings or other activities. So that was just a constant ongoing fear for them. And one major change is prior to COVID, nursing students, I mean, we trained them on death and dying, and that is part of nursing and nurturing those patients and their families. But prior to COVID, maybe you'd have 1 or 2 deaths that in a semester that a student might actually experience. And through that, we were able to debrief and discuss that. And it depended. If they were in an oncology unit, that might be an expected death. If they were in an ICU, that could be an unexpected code blue, a cardiac arrest. And that was it. We were able to keep that, processing that with the students pretty stable. Post-COVID, all of us were exposed to death and dying at a level never before experienced. And all healthcare providers have been overwhelmed with that. So we were very diligent in making sure that we had a weekly debriefing with the students, bringing up, much like Reverend Seaton mentioned, you bring up the fear and the caring and the emotion, and deliberately, with a deliberate intention of discussing this and bringing it out in the open. And I felt like the faculty did a magnificent job on these weekly meetings and really addressing it. Some students still remain very fearful, as all of us perhaps still are. So that was really a powerful process. That's the journey that I have seen evolve.
What would you say now, as I mentioned earlier about vaccines are now here, what do you anticipate things are going to be going forward for your students, even for the faculty, as you see that more people are getting the vaccine?
I will say that this semester, we have been participating in the immunization clinics and seeing the large numbers of people coming forth to get their vaccinations. And there's a trend that throughout the hospitals, there is a decrease in the COVID patient numbers. I see that in the future, we will be back into the clinical settings for all of our hours. And I truly believe there will be a yearly booster, like our yearly flu shot, and that we will always be dealing with this, but perhaps in a preventive method, not in this overwhelming, devastated pandemic.
What have you and your faculty colleagues been doing? Because you're working so diligently with the students and providing reassurance and support and encouragement and opportunities for them to process their thoughts and feelings. How's it going, though, for you and your faculty colleagues in terms of dealing with your own self-care and thoughts and feelings about what's going on?
Well, that's a good question, and I think it varies depending on person. I would say that I have noticed since we've been virtual, that meetings and obligations have expanded and grown exponentially. And so developing some boundaries around that and still being diligent to try and make sure all the anybody's issues are addressed. But for most part, many of them have really strong family connections and are really taking time to do some exercising. One great thing that actually the School of Social Work offered for free was a Koru meditation course, and I took that, and it's a magnificent, and many of the faculty that I work with took that as well. And so those types of things are the best, you know, they really work. Plus we can discuss it with each other and debrief with each other. And it's really been, actually, that's very a positive confidence building, morale boost.
This, I'm just thinking as everyone is talking that this, because you and I and our colleagues work at a research university, that all of what we're talking about when the dust settles, I think is going to be very useful research at some point in time. To talk about holistic end of life responses and the complexities of all of this is going to be the world, the nation needs to know about challenges that we faced and how we stepped up to the plate and took care of business in a wonderful way.
I think everybody's been very innovative.
Yes.
Very dedicated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Allard. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work that you're doing there at the College of Nursing and Health Innovation.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Ms. Tina Bracken, clinical social worker and psychotherapist at the Texas Health Resources Arlington Memorial Hospital. Tina, won't you share with us your role there at the hospital? And Tina, you may unmute your mic.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
so much. Yes, tell us about your role there at the hospital.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm the social worker for our intensive care units, both our regular intensive care and then also our COVID ICU unit.
Tell us about your recent experiences. We've been under these COVID pandemic constrictions for a year. How have things been for you in the ICU?
They have been crazy. It's been a little different. It's been a learning experience for me. As you can tell, as I tried to get onto the Zoom meeting, this has been different, clearly, because my role has taken on, helping families and setting up family meetings on technology, on the iPads, on the Zoom calls, trying to stay connected, not with the patients, not being able to go in the rooms, and then also with their families that can't be in the room with their patients, which is devastating, especially when it comes to end of life and you're trying to help them, process everything that's going on. So using technology, as you can see, has been a big part of how we've done it. And you can see how well I did it when I introduced myself. I figured out our whole phone system went down, and that was an issue.
Yes, all the things we didn't learn in social work school, right?
Yeah. Somebody forgot to teach me Zoom in social work school.
That's right.
But we've learned that, and for me, it's been a challenge, but it's also a challenge for those members on the other side of the phone that trying. So a lot of times I'm spending time with those families, not only trying to keep them up to date, but helping them get on technology so that they can actually see their loved ones. Even if they're not able to communicate, the patient can't communicate. We're getting the families in there so they can see and they can talk to their loved ones. And that can be a challenge. There's times I've spent an hour and a half with someone just trying to help them get on technology and then deciding, I'm dropping my phone in a baggie and you're going in with my phone. Because you've got to let them see, and you've got to let them process the change, because often it's a dramatic change from the time they enter the door of our emergency room to the time they get to intensive care unit. So my goal is to be that person that helps them connect with their loved ones, but also helps them connect with the doctor. So we'll do a lot of family conferences by, by technology, whether it's iPad, whether it's using our language line when we have people that speak different languages that we're trying to process and give information to and stay connected with. I think that's a big, stay connected.
What, given all of what you have gone through over the past year during the pandemic, what are you and your colleagues doing for your self-care and wellness?
Pray, 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 pray. That would be my first line of defense, because that's about how I've gotten through this. And I think that's a big part, is me praying and people praying for me as we're, as we're walking through this. I think a lot too with our departments, as we go through these struggles, we spend time talking to each other. It's debriefing. Let's talk about what just happened. Let me know how you feel. I mean, we've had, I had a respiratory therapist come out of a room just broken. So it's, just surrounding her, just processing with her, because, it's hard. It's hard to be involved and watch people suffer. So, being able to talk about that with each other, be able to be there for each other, it's been a huge part of just making it day by day. Coming back to my office and crying sometimes, that's, that sometimes is just what I do. Because it's hard.
It certainly is okay to cry.
Yes, certainly.
It's
I certainly hope so.
It's just fine to cry. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's so important. What do you anticipate, as I shared with or asked Dr. Allard about vaccines are on the horizon, people are feeling a sense of a little bit more of optimism and hopefulness right now. What do you envision going forward things are going to be like for you, given the work that you're doing in the ICU? What are you hoping for?
Well, and I agree with Chaplain. The numbers have gone down, and that's encouraging. I mean, that is encouraging. And my desire, as my hope is that as everybody gets vaccinated, that we can begin to open up a little bit more, and we can begin to have allow more visitors to be here. That's my number one hope, is that we're able to do that. We're able to be wise and still be smart and make smart choices on what we do, but being able to open up a little bit more than what we are now.
That's right. Are you doing anything special for social work, Mo?
For social work, we're eating.
You're eating lots of food. Huh?
People will feel first, okay, yeah, I'm going to give you cookies, and I'm going to give you lunch. Yeah, and that's we're eating, and I think probably just people that are come by and just say, we appreciate what you do. That goes a long way.
That's good.
And it's a lot less calories.
That's right. And Chaplain Boswell has some chocolate chip cookies for you too.
I know. I listened to that and I think, my husband wishes that was what I would do for special.
He can FedEx that to you or something.
Yeah. You can. I'll give you my address.
That's right. Thank you so much, Tina. Appreciate you so much. Keep up the great work you're doing there at Arlington Memorial Hospital.
Thank you so much.
We're going to segue to Dr. Gabriella Whitener, who's a clinical assistant professor at UTA, College of Nursing and Health Innovation. Gabriella, if you would share with us how you're doing and your role with your program.
Hello, good afternoon. I am a clinical professor, and I have a dual role. I also keep an open part-time position in an ICU. So I've experienced COVID on two fronts. As a professor, yes, just like Dr. Allard mentioned, we have the first impact in March 2020 when we had to switch from real clinicals to virtual clinicals. So I had to learn how to provide virtual teaching to the students. And then as we progressed and we started to open up a little bit and went to the clinical sites, I had to be very observant on all the students to wear PPE, to teach them how to protect themselves, and to teach them how to act as a professional in an environment that required not only clinical skills, but also safety skills. We've had ups and downs where, we had to quarantine, we had to, this week we were going to clinical, next week we were doing virtual, and flexibility has been put to, to the challenge. And we went through. It was, I think, in my 26 years career as a nurse, this has been the most challenging year. Then as a bedside nurse, that was in ICU, that was an eye-opening, because I went to work one day and to find out that the unit has been closed up as a COVID unit with lockdown, with no visitors, not anybody, with patients that had a diagnosis that we really were just, trying to find how to do our best and how to save them. And it's been a very difficult time, because you not only had to treat the patient clinically, but you had to be at their side to help them cope and to help the families cope. Everybody has a different view of how this disease had to be dealt with. Patient education has been stretched to the max. So now it's, I can recall the first day when I was basically had, wipes in my hand, and I was cleaning everything, the phone, the desk, the pen, the ID, everything. It was like, it took a while to slow down.
Yeah. So you became a compulsive cleaner?
For a while, yes.
I understand. It was necessary. What, as I mentioned to others, our colleagues here on the line, that with the vaccines on the horizon, what do you anticipate? How do you anticipate things are going to be going forward as far as us trying to get a handle on the pandemic?
So the vaccines have been a God-given sent gift. From my colleagues, we only had 3 cases. We went from having a full unit of COVID patients to now having 1, maybe 2. We've opened up the unit. So the vaccines are helping decreasing the number of cases. Plus, I think it also promotes a sense of positivity among not only the medical staff, the frontline workers, but to families. We have open visitation, and that helps a lot with the anxiety and the anguish about, having a loved one far away with strangers taking care of them and not being able to see them and so on. So the vaccines are just have been the most amazing help for this pandemic.
Appreciate you. And any self-care tips you'd like to share with us?
So during the pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic, our church has switched to Zoom, of course. And, I remember one day a very brave pastor came to give the last rites to a patient. And, we dressed him up with PPE, even the Bible, we covered it in plastic and everything. And when he came out, I just burst into tears and told him, "Bless me, Father, I just need you to do that for me." And after that, every time he came, he was looking to see if I'm working. And he was always stopping and praying with the staff. And that for me was the most the hardest moment in the whole pandemic, when somebody who I've never known, I've never seen before, took the time to help us going through difficult moments. I also do yoga, and I stay busy. And I talk with everybody who wants to, a little help and to share information, the students, the colleagues, and that helps a lot. I mean, it's just like, it's recommended for all the stress moments to talk it out, and that helps.
I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. I thank Mrs. Stephanie Hughes, Reverend Melody Seaton, Chaplain Daryl Boswell, Dr. Patty Allard, Christina Bracken, and Dr. Gabriella Whitener. Thank you all so much for your holistic responses during this catastrophic pandemic. And you're doing tremendous, tremendous work in terms of responding to our communities, to our patients, to parishioners, to the families, and to the wider community. Keep up the great work that you're doing in terms of the respective callings that you are involved with. At this time, we're going to open up the floor for any questions that anyone may have. This is your time to ask questions of our conversation partners.
Please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A. There is a Q&A feature on Zoom. If you are on Facebook viewing with us, please put your questions in the comment, and I'll be sure to share them with our panel.
Any questions at this time?
We have one question that was just placed in the Q&A.
All right. If you may state the question, read the question.
The question is for Tina. It says, were social workers at the hospital given PPE at the beginning of the pandemic, or was PPE saved for bedside nurses?
For us, PPE, if we went into that area, we did do the N90, we could do the N95. We did not go into the actual rooms. So we did not use the the gowns and the gloves at that time, because we were not actually entering the room. So we would use the N95, the mask.
Thank you so much, Tina. Any other questions?
Looks like we have another in the Q&A from Brian. His question is, what has been your experience in the Houston Methodist Hospital system with families' willingness to complete advanced directives? How many already had them?
That is a very good question, and it's one that I would say 98% of the patients did not have advanced directives. And I don't have the specific numbers, but I would say it's almost nobody had really thought through this thing enough. And if they did think through it, they didn't believe that it was ever going to really get to the place that it did. And so we have spent a lot of time doing advanced directives. Of course, one of the things that we've had to do is kind of modify the way we do those instead of actually being in the room and having the paper copy and they write on it. We have to do that now technologically, but it's one of those things that I'm excited about this next session that's coming up, because the moral dilemmas that surrounds that whole issue with advanced directives is something that a lot of people don't think about. But if you don't have an advanced directive and you get to a place that you're at end of life, your family members may say, well, am I killing my loved one by withdrawing the mechanical or the life support? And what a heartbreaking thing for them, and the guilt that they're dealing with. And so an advanced directive is so very important. And we recommend that everyone fill out either a medical power of attorney or a directive to physicians, surrogates, and family members, and complete those anytime you're in the hospital.
Great information. Thank you. Thank you, Chaplain.
Our next question is from Debbie. There has been a lot of discussion about faith-based interventions and coping strategies, but not all clients have a faith system. Any thoughts or tips about working with folks without a faith system?
Whoever would like to take that question. Reverend Seaton.
I'll try to jump in. Yeah, okay. I think hope is universal, whether you are faith-based or not. So helping people have hope and finding out those things that rob them of that hope, which oftentimes was fear of the unknown or somehow feeling out of control. So I think hope is a way to, to help people.
Would any other panelists wish to address that question? Very important question, actually.
It is actually really very difficult. When they come here, those are the people that break my heart the most, because they're at the point where they have no hope, and there is no hope because that's all there is. It's done. I try to get them to get help, to seek out help for grief, because what most people can rely, or some people can rely on, they can't. So I think professional help is even more important when they don't have that faith to fall back on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Any other comments on that particular question? Very important question.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, because it is when there is for them with no faith and they feel there's no hope. I think that's the time you meet them where you are, and you make sure that you're staying close to them and walking beside them to kind of help guide them through such a difficult situation. So I would say those with that, just stay close to them.
Yes. And for some people, faith constitutes believing in a power greater than themselves. So maybe that could be, for some people, their framework in terms of how they look at this particular situation.
Well, Dr. Fox, one of the things I'd like to just share too is, as a Christian chaplain, working in a hospital that is so diverse here in Houston. Houston's the most diverse city in the country. We deal with patients not only with no hope, but patients that are from other faith backgrounds. And we've had to learn a lot about the cultural differences in death and that surrounds death, and the different practices when a patient of a different faith may die. And so those have all been things that I think we should have known ahead of time, but because of COVID, it brought everything kind of to the head very quickly, and we realized we were behind the learning curve on that. So we had to work very hard to minister to people wherever they were at, regardless of faith or their faith background, or no faith at all.
I think going forward, and I appreciate that, what you just said, Chaplain, that it's going to bring about, I'm thinking, some different strategies for teaching in the schools of social work, in the schools of psychology, in the nursing schools, in the seminaries and what have you. I think one of the lessons that's going to be learned from this pandemic experience is that we're going to have to learn so that the learning curve is not so steep. So that we're equipped based in our educational process of knowing that we need to know a lot about this holistic approach, so that we can go faster in terms of ministering and sharing with and caring for and being where the patient is, being where the family is, so that we can and help them in a better, faster, a more timely fashion. I think that's what this all might help us with as well. Any other questions?
Dr. Fox, there are a couple questions in the chat, not the question and answer area.
All right.
One is, how do you deal with guilt? If you feel like you did everything you could, but it was still not good enough, how do you continue forward?
That's a deep question. One of my colleagues want to respond to that one. Dealing with guilt. What I know as a therapist is that oftentimes guilt has to do with feeling badly about our behavior, something we have or have not done. And it's different from shame. Shame has to do with feeling badly about who you are. It's a self-esteem issue.
And as a family therapist myself, we would describe that as neurotic guilt, which means you didn't intentionally do anything wrong. You didn't have any bad intent involved in what happened. You did your best and all you could. And I really recommend people seek therapy to work on their grief issues in those moments when you just need to move on, but you're not able to.
Because otherwise it can lead to stuckness. And being stuck in that, because this, what we're talking about is traumatic. These losses are traumatic. Traumatic situations are things that happen outside of the range of normal human experience, and the pandemic is shown off a trauma. And so counseling and the request for mental health services over the past year has gone up astronomically. And so the therapy and counseling and support groups and all of that, I think is just, that's wise counsel. That's wise counsel. Deal with grief and loss and all of what we've been through and continue to go through right now. Any other questions in the chat? I'm not able to see the chat right now, so I'm relying on our colleagues to let us know what's going on in the chat.
There was a question, are loved ones allowed in the rooms when a patient is dying from COVID, or are they still Zooming in visitors? In Houston Methodist Hospital, we are allowing some patients to go in. They must social distance from their loved one, and they must be completely covered with the PPE that is provided. And basically, it's just an opportunity for them to say goodbye. And that's very difficult because they have to social distance. They can't touch their loved one. And so it's been very hard. But yes, at Houston Methodist, they are allowing family members into the room with a dying COVID patient.
How long has that been going on for, in your experience, Chaplain? Is that recent?
It's very recent. Yeah, within the last 30 days.
Okay.
And Arlington Memorial does the same. We do allow to have family members. Usually we try to do no more than 2 at a time, but definitely gown them from head to toe, just like we gown and glove staff members. But we do allow them to go in, and we monitor their time, but we do allow them to go in.
That's good. That's good. Any other questions in the chat? I'm aware that our time is going to be coming to a close in a few minutes.
No,
Any
no
other-
more in chat.
No more in the chat.
Just
Okay.
in the question and answer area.
All right. And what's there?
Our
Um,
next question is from Paula. It says, first of all, I want to offer sympathy to those that lost loved ones and thank all of you for your work at the bedside. Did any of you send family away for safety or stay away in another location?
I would
Gabriella?
like to answer that.
Yes.
I have
Yes.
colleagues who, have separated, like they send a family member to stay with the parents, or we practice a lot of conscientious extreme hygiene measures. For example, like I get home and from the garage, I go straight to the bathroom, take a shower, change clothes, and then come and say hello to everybody in the house, including the dogs. And that has been something that most of nurses have been encouraged to do. So to avoid contaminating, people at home and loved ones. It is a little bit more difficult when you have small children because, they tend to open the door and say, hello, mom, hello. But from what I know from my colleagues, that's what they do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Any other questions in the chat?
I have answered some of the questions about visitation at the time of death.
Okay. Okay. The thing that I don't know if we addressed, we did somewhat, but I'm not sure if there may be more to be said about it, about burnout. How have y'all been dealing with burnout or potential burnout, or what you've observed with your colleagues about burnout?
Burnout, it's a fact of daily life. I've had in the last year, we've had a lot of nurses who have switched from change units, kind of like going from ICU to mother baby, or going from ICU to day surgery, or something that's not as intense. A lot of nurses who were contemplating to retire have made their decision right then and there, and they retired. So we are at a point where the new capstone graduates are going to be welcome to be our new colleagues very soon. But burnout, and we also, the government has provided funds, and we had travel nurses coming, and so we were able to take the time off. And that was very good because we were able to take time off and spend some time with the family, and recharge.
It's good.
And that's how basically we went through.
It's good.
I would just like to say that one of the things that happened during COVID is when they shut down the hospitals to visitors, they also shut down the hospital to volunteers. And as a spiritual care chaplain, our hospital had about 250 spiritual care volunteers from all the different faith groups. And when they were taken away, then that threw all of that load of visiting patients, because our patient numbers didn't decline, they actually increased dramatically. So the chaplains were required to do more, and we were spending more time here at the hospital. And the burnout was really something that we knew could happen very easily. So one of the things that our hospital did is they offered us hero days, where we could actually take a day just to mellow out every once in a while and recharge. And that was something that was very appreciative. We were very appreciative of that and took advantage of that as well. And then they offered us some bonuses for working so many extended hours, and encouraged us not to pay bills with those bonuses necessarily, but to go do something for ourselves and for our family. And so that helped a lot too.
It's good stuff. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you.
Is it okay if I share what I tried to do?
Yes.
Yeah, because as a pastor, the first thing you're thinking about are your parishioners and others. So when we went back the first time in September for in-person worship, we only went 3 Sundays a month, the first 3 Sundays. The 4th and 5th Sundays, that was rest for everybody. And oftentimes what I did was enlist my colleagues to record sermons, and we broadcasted those sermons during the 11 o'clock hour. We closed in November when our numbers rose here in Illinois, and we opened back up in January. So we've been doing this staggering thing. And then when we go back, it's just 3 Sundays a month. Most of the members don't come back, which is fine. They get to see it virtually. So that helps me out, with my self-care.
That's good. That's good. That's good. But as I share with my colleagues, social workers need a social worker, chaplains need a chaplain, ministers need a minister, nurses need a nurse. They need somebody to talk to process our thoughts and feelings. They say that the old saying is that those who burn out are the ones who are on fire, meaning that you've been on the front lines, you've been doing the work, hard charging and all of that, giving all of your time, talent, and energy to doing the work that you've been called to do. And we're just humans, and we can get exhausted. And that's what the burnout represents, being overwhelmed and exhausted. So we have to recharge. I appreciate what you've shared in terms of how you all have been able to recharge, and how the systems in terms of the healthcare system, as you mentioned, Chaplain, that how it was able to meet you at your point of need in a wonderful way. And for you, Pat, Reverend, that you talked about how you had to tailor some things there in the church setting, in the community setting, so that the parishioners' needs could be met, but your needs could be met as well. So that is super, super, super great. Again, our time is winding down for now. If there are no more questions in the chat or on the Q&A, is there anything there?
Yeah, we have about 6 questions left in the Q&A.
Okay, let's do that.
Were there any panelists that worked in hospice out in the field, and what did that look like for you throughout last year?
Anybody work in hospice directly at all, or made referrals to hospice and have some familiarity with that?
I talk to hospice nurses, obviously, when they need us. And it was rough on them, just like all the rest of us. One I talked to who had a COVID family that she was taking care of, she stood with her faith, and she said, Jesus didn't walk away from the leper. I can't walk away from him. So she was the only one in their group that would take COVID, but she took all of them. And she was burning out. So I talked to her for an hour just so she have somebody to listen to her. And that's what we have to do with each other in this situation, is be there for each other, because we're all in it together.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I referred to hospice a lot during this time, and we did have agencies. I think fortunately the ones that we use a lot, they were able to kind of share among each other. So we had agencies that were able to have more nurses, so that you didn't have one nurse burning out, but it was hard on those nurses. It is hard on those nurses and for them to have support and to know how much they're appreciated. It was helpful for the families to be able, if they could to have them at home.
Any other responses to that very, very important question about hospice? Hearing none, we're going to go on to the next question.
The next question, do any of the panelists know of resources in your community specifically for people in the helping professions, such as support groups for first responders, etc.? Are your teammates and coworkers seeking that type of help or open to it?
Whoever would like to take that, Dr. Allard, Dr. Whitener, or others? Resources for first responders.
Sorry, I'm not aware of, I haven't investigated that, but I'm sure we can, I'll make sure I do get that information.
So at the hospital, we have a support group through the chaplains and through the palliative care team. We have sessions for prayer, for spiritual assistance. On every unit, we have a, it's so innovative. It's a ball with a solution and a stack of papers, and you write something that you're angry about that day, and then you put it in the ball and it wipes out what you wrote. The meaning of it is just like the water cleans the paper. This is how your bad thoughts should be cleaned up. It's very, one of the chaplains came up with that. And of course, it's the conversations that take place always whenever there is a family meeting and we have a difficult case, we always talk it through. We've learned that from the time when we were running the Code Blues. So yes, this having conversation and expressing your feelings in front of those who feel and can be compassionate towards you helps tremendously. And then we, help each other. A pat on the back, a cup of coffee whenever you feel down, anything, a break, an extra break, somebody is leaving you for a break, that also it makes a wealth of difference, during the day. So the little things. We've also had a lot of support from the community. People who send prayers, who send water. When you are wearing PPE and you can't really take a break, whenever you go to your break room, if you have water available to drink and you remember to drink water, that makes helps a lot with keeping your body, healthy. Our physicians also encouraged us a lot to and reassured us, that everything was done, and they did everything they could to develop a plan of care for those who were sick, and made us part of the team involved in a way that we felt that our actions were
She's on a Zoom call. 15 more minutes.
That's all I have.
Thank you. That is very good, very good, very good. Other questions there?
There's not really a question, but there is a follow-up comment to the last question.
Yes.
Karen says, I follow a healthcare workers COVID-19 support group on Facebook and have been very discouraged about the number of new nurses considering leaving the profession.
Yeah. What do you think, Dr. Allard? What are you thinking about that? Dr. Whitener?
I do think that that's been an issue for some of the nurses, especially when it's been so overwhelming for them, particularly new nurses who aren't quite seasoned and haven't learned the coping techniques and doubt that, is this really something I want to do for a living? When we have them in our courses, they're very excited, and many of them have a lot of clarity around that. So I wonder if that's people that aren't having a good support system in their environment. Yeah.
Having the support is vitally important, given the complexity of this work.
All right, and there's one last question that comes from Facebook. You guys touched on this a little bit throughout the session, but the question is, how have things changed since the vaccine?
I think what's been said already by our colleagues is that there's a renewed sense of optimism and hopefulness. Decreased numbers of patients that have been hospitalized and that perhaps have a severe COVID disease. And more vaccines are on the way. Apparently, from what I see from the news reports, it's going to be going down to pregnant women and young kids and teenagers and young adults and what have you. So as the vaccines become more available, that is going to go down to a whole lot of other people. And so I think that summer, fall, winter is going to, I'm hopeful that things are going to be much, much, much better for us as globally. That things are going to be better for us.
One of the things I'd just like to share is that this COVID time that we've gone through has caused us to take a look at how we can take care of ourselves a little bit better. In our hospitals, we have implemented a Serenity Room on each floor for the staff so that they could go and just kind of chill out for a few minutes and get away from what was happening out on the floor. I think that those type of things will continue to be used even after the COVID pandemic is over. But the other thing too is technology, where we have not used technology, especially in ministry in the past. We now know that it can be done, and so to be able to minister to a family member that may be in New York or Hong Kong or whatever, at the same time we're ministering to their family members, it's opened up a whole new world for us. And I don't think that we'll ever lose that again. And so that's a real positive thing. And of course, with the hospitals finding that they can utilize technology to reach their employees, we're going to have to deal with them constantly wanting to do a Zoom conference or a Zoom meeting. So they don't pay for lunches when you do Zoom, and so that's kind of the bad thing about that. But overall, I think there's been some real positive things that we can look forward to in the future as well.
Yes, 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 indeed. Yes, indeed. All righty. If there's no other questions.
No other questions.
Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap up for today. And again, I want to give thanks and shout out to all of our participants today, our panelists, Mrs. Stephanie Hughes from the Hughes Family Tribute Center in Dallas, Reverend Melody Seaton, Senior Pastor of the Grace United Church of Christ in Sauk Village, Illinois, Chaplain Daryl Boswell from Houston Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas, Dr. Patty Allard, a clinical assistant professor from University of Texas at Arlington, College of Nursing and Health Innovation, Ms. Tina Bracken, clinical social worker with the Texas Health Resources, Arlington Memorial Hospital, Arlington, Texas, and Dr. Gabriella Whitener, clinical assistant professor at University of Texas at Arlington, College of Nursing and Health Innovation. It's been my pleasure to have been here with everyone, our viewers, our listeners, our panelists. Shout out to our our staff, Coral and company, who have helped us with technology, talk about technology, who have helped us to organize and to be on point with all that we've done today in terms of getting this word out to the community. And I would also like to acknowledge and special thanks to my colleagues on the planning team, which includes Professor Tracy Orwig, Dr. Sophia Fantas, Professor Becky Baird, Dr. Patty Allard, Dr. Gabriella Whitener, and special thanks to everybody who's here with us today. This conversation has been so important and so impactful. And at this point in time, we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to share with you just in closing a little bit more talk. Somebody asked about resources. These are some video resources that are available online about funeral homes, about VA chaplains, about the time of COVID, funeral homes as a last responder, overload going on in the funeral homes at this time. Again, chaplain's response, spiritual guidance at this time, death through a nurse's eyes, very important and impactful short film. And with that in mind, I didn't mention about the end-of-life doulas, overwhelmed funeral home in East Los Angeles, and creative responses to COVID-19 in terms of, again, the perspective of the funeral directors. So again, thank you all so very much for your time and consideration, for your patience, and for the work that you do. We have to keep on keeping on one day at a time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fox.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.